Welcome to another episode of Welcome Disruption. Thank you for joining us. Today we have Heidi Wagner, the founder of the Passions Project, and she's going to be talking about how we can break down ageism through understanding an individual's passion and what value that brings to senior living organizations nationwide. You don't want to miss this. Heidi, thank you so much for joining us. The Passions Project has such an incredible mission. We came across each other when we were at Leading Age in Nashville, and I am so excited to get to help share your story. Can you tell us a little bit about how the project began?
Well, first of all, thanks so much for having me. And it was incredible to meet you in Nashville, and always great to make new connections. And you were definitely one of those new connections that I was really excited about. And as far as the project goes, I've been doing the Passions Project since about 2011. And it was during a time when I was working at a retirement community in Boulder, Colorado. And it started because I was really getting more connected with my photography. And when you start working on some kind of being connected to an art, you try to, when you're practicing something, you want to actually work with people that will be patient with you, but also that really inspire you. And I was really inspired by the older adults that I was working with at Fraser, which is the community that I was working at. And it was really their stories that I wanted to highlight. And it was through the process of wanting to highlight their stories and knowing their value that the true mission of the project really came forward. This idea of when you see people through their passion, you no longer see the ways that you're different from them. You see ways to connect. And then I'm a person that loves connection. So to create a project and to be doing something now that is continuing to connect people, that is, for me, the most rewarding part about this work.
Absolutely. Brene Brown says that connection is an irreducible need of men, women, and children. And I think that so much of what we talk about in senior living is about connection or creating connections. And observing your installation at Leading Age, you've captured so many incredible individual stories so far with this series. What impact do you feel like the Passions Project is going to have on broader views around aging?
My hope is that people stop treating older adults as though they are no longer relevant and or important to our culture and our society. It seems as though when people reach a certain age, there's this overall feeling that, oh, well, now that you're older, you need to step aside and let other people shine. Well, I think when we all shine, that's when we are at our strongest. And so to diminish the light of people, and those are people, those are all people that are living in the margins. When we diminish their value and their light, I think it's a real disservice to the powerful and beautiful culture that we could be. So I don't think we're living up to our fullest of potential and really being our fullest of potential when we diminish the voices and stories of older adults. We're okay with letting them be something that we can be inspired by their past, but it's like, who are they now and what are they doing now? They're still living on this planet. Their life is still important and powerful and engaging. So why are we like asking them to step aside when they should also be in the forefront with all of us?
Yeah, incorporated into the conversation. I feel like the value of wisdom and age allows for a perspective that you can't duplicate until you've accumulated that amount of life experience. And I think often, at least from my perspective, there is a connection between meaning, right? What we do that brings meaning, and that you use the word marginalized. And I love that, the marginalization of older adults as though they don't have anything to contribute, which again, their wisdom and their life experience, they've seen and experienced things that we couldn't. But also, with that taking away their voice, I feel like we tell them that they have no meaning, or that their life has no meaning. And I think your project specifically does a lot to address stereotypes that we see. Not all seniors or older adults are sitting around in rocking chairs. Some of them are making music, and some of them are actively, pursuing activism and paying that forward generationally. So from your perspective, what stereotypes do you feel like are most important that we challenge in the coming year?
Well, I think, gosh, so many, but really when you really narrow it down, it's just the value of everybody, and that everybody's individual story brings value. And so when we want to create or kind of meld or silence people's stories, that's not a true representation of our country, of our culture. And it's just like you're missing some vital voices that can create change and really bring people or unify people in a way. And I think when we stereotype, it's a way of dehumanizing people. And anytime you make a choice to dehumanize somebody, that is not an added value for any of us. So continuing to raise up people's voices, continuing to bring people forward, and to continue to connect people. Again, we talk about division. Again, we talk about being on our islands and listening only to certain voices. How can we connect? It's through our passions. And that's how I've always felt, because when you see someone engaging in their passion, you're not thinking like, oh, well, I don't really want to talk to them. You are so interested in talking, especially if you really connect with that passion that they're doing. If you're someone who loves music and you play the trumpet and you see someone playing the trumpet and also that's their passion, there is that piece that there's things that can bring us together. And on a very simple level, I just think that when you think about passion, it is passion that can really bring us to that place of commonality where other things can kind of either be set aside or become, just diminished just a little bit in order to let that passion shine and for that piece to really bring us together. Because these days, like I know for myself, I'm struggling to find connection with people I don't know. And absolutely, when I do and work on the Passions Project, when I go to communities or I'm working with organizations to meet other people that are passionate, it always gives me more than what, take away more than what I feel like I leave sometimes. But I do, it's so much fun, and it's just, it brightens me. And so I know that it does that for other people too.
I love the idea of passion as a unifier. I think often, you mentioned there's a homogenization that happens with older adults that we assume that they are all the same. They've all had the same life experiences. They all have the same needs and expectations now. And, we do a lot of deep dive market research, and for us, understanding the nuances is a game changer for getting the right people into the community to experience it. And I always say that, like, your last resident move-in should be your next referral source. So if we're doing things that capture the essence of an individual, that make them feel seen and heard and respected and valued, that's something that's ultimately going to be to the community's benefit. But also, so many communities are actively looking for diversity. And I think the way to do that, one great way, is tapping into the passions of their current residents and saying, what artist friends do you have? What activist friends do you have? So for you, when you are approaching, a new subject, how do you go about capturing that passion authentically? Like, if you could just maybe walk us through a typical interview and photo session and like what you're looking for in those moments.
Before I even take out the camera, I sit down with people and I just ask them about who they are. Ask them about ask them about their passion. How long have they been doing it? Why? What is their why? And I think when people can tap into their why, it adds depth. It adds vulnerability. Like, I'm not going to ask you to do something vulnerable if I'm not willing to be vulnerable with you as well. So, people are often can either be taken aback or put off by just a camera in their face. Well, I never want people to feel like that's my objective. I want us to like get to know each other, sit down, and then it's like an agreement that like, let's do something creative together. It's a collaborative, you know, thing that we're doing. It's not just I'm doing something to you and you're giving something to me. It's a reciprocal relationship that I try to create, and that then just allows people to feel comfortable, to want to share, to want to bring out the best in, you know, who they are and what their passion is. And it's people are really proud, have a lot of pride about their passion. Like this is, you know, it's a part of who they are. So it's in a part of who they are that they're really proud of. So that makes my job easier too. And so for me, it's just about how do I get people to tap into that, and how do I get them, you know, how do we together create something that we both are proud of? And I think, you know, every photo shoot is different and every person is different. And so that's sometimes the stress of the job is being like, I feel a real sense of responsibility of like, I want to be able to tell their story in a way that they feel I've captured them. And because I also, you know, like I can't take a picture of something that's not there. I need them to be comfortable and to be ready and excited to show me something about themselves too. So it's an interesting process, but I would say that's the part that when I think about a photo shoot, that is the part I get most stressed out about. I'm like, will I do this person's story justice? And that's what I want to make sure I do every time.
I love that it's a collaborative process. And one of the things, going back to the idea of how much time these individuals have often invested in these passions. Like when you think about it, interviewing a 21-year-old who is a piano prodigy is one experience, but interviewing someone who has worked on their craft for 20, 30, 40, 50, 60 years. I mean, that's a level of mastery that I feel like you get the opportunity to showcase. And I can imagine that it's definitely a weight on your shoulders. I know for us, you know, anytime we're trying to capture the story or be the story keeper, there is that weight of responsibility. And I think it's interesting too, what you're doing by highlighting individuals who've really invested in their passions. What I've seen at my communities is, you know, those people who are carrying the torch are often inviting other people who maybe never touched art or photography or music or anything in their life through their excitement and passion and willingness to teach. We're able to make the community more inclusive, more diverse, expand everyone's interests. And that I think is incredibly powerful for not just building a diverse community, but building in value into every single day.
I totally agree with that, because I think that the feedback that I've gotten is when people have seen like the Passions Project, because like the culminating project is something that becomes public art in your building. It's like it's your wall, it's your family wall, it's like your story. And so people that maybe aren't in the project because they didn't think that they had a passion, they'll say, I see these people engaging in their passions, and it really made me like question myself, like, what is my passion, and what would I be pictured doing if I was part of this project? And I think when we're all tapped into our passions and we're thinking about and pursuing our passions, it just makes us incredibly interesting people to be around, to talk to engage with, and yes, be mentors for other people to then be questioning and wondering, like, how can I be more connected to my passion? Because I think our passions, I don't believe when people say I don't have a passion, I never believe them. There's something that we do, each of us do every day that is important to us, that we feel like is something that we are excited about waking up to do. And it can be as simple as a crossword puzzle, but as like you were mentioning earlier, that idea of like something you've been pursuing for decades and for your entire life and that's always been there for you. And sometimes your passions come and go. I mean, there's some that now you're really, you know, like you've always been art, but it was paint, you know, you used to be really into painting, and now it's more watercolor, and now it's, you know, fiber art. And as long as you have a passion, I think that's the thing that I like to tell people. Just be connected to, it helps you to be connected to self as well as help you connect to others.
Absolutely. And one of the things that I think there's so much value around, I'm a big proponent of intergenerational programming. I've always been very influenced by the older adults that I have close relationships with, and it's where I learned. It's where I kind of was mentored, or where I was guided, but also just inspired by their passion. I don't have to love the same thing to learn from their love for the thing. Um, and I think that often art specifically is one that has been coming up over and over in my conversation with communities, whether it's Megaloport and Art Against Ageism and the installations they're doing, which are so cool, or if it's the the individual passions at a community. One of our clients recently got a grant, and they're doing a great expansion. And you mentioned textiles. They're incorporating textiles. I think that just an art space by itself, just an open studio, doesn't always give a new resident kind of the direction or the experience that, like, this is a community activity, or this is a way to connect with other people. And it helps to have a champion. It helps to have kind of that resident artist, or activist, or party planner, or whatever role that person holds. Are there any specific stories from the Passion Project that are most meaningful to you? It was so touching watching you interact with the panel members at Leading Age, and both Diana and I took away so much from that interaction and discussion. So are there any others that you would share?
One of my favorites, and it's one I always go back to when asked this question, because it really, to me, kind of shows like what the Passions Project is all about, was that there was a resident that I photographed in a community, Christian care community in Texas, in Dallas, Texas area. He was specifically in Fort Worth. And he was part of a doo-wop group in like the 1950s called the Rivingtons. And so the song that most people might have heard of is, it's called The Bird's the Word. And they were this group. And so that was his life. He lived away from his family. He lived in California. And then now he's living in Texas, closer to family. And he's older, but people didn't really know about his past and who he was. I mean, he was performing around the world, doing different things, in a way that, he wouldn't necessarily know when you met him now. And so for his photo shoot, we went to like a local theater. We put the music on. Mostly they performed in like these red tuxedos. And so he had on his red tuxedo that he wore to perform with his top hat. And we put the music on, and he just started to just blossom into this performer and this remembering. And it's like all the moves were still there, all of the synchronized movement that he used to do on stage, everything, every word to every song. And it was so incredible to watch him just be so excited and to be so seen. And then, a couple months later, I went back to the community, and they had their Passions Project up, and his picture was there. And I said, "Mr. Harris, what do you think about your picture?" And he said, "Thank you for making me famous again." Because people didn't know about what his past experiences were, and now they saw him that way, and we're asking him about his past, and we're asking him about his experiences, this time in his life where it was so important to him. And then he also started performing again. One of the entertainers that would come in and work with the residents or just do shows at the community asked him to perform with him, and they started going out to other communities and performing. So it became that place, that thing that people could find a common ground with him. And it meant so much to me to hear that he felt famous again. Like, again, he felt this thing, that this part of himself just got to shine. And to me, I loved working with him, and I loved his photo shoot. It was very impactful to me. I mean, all of us in the room for his photo shoot were just crying to start with, and then to know what it then brought later people from that community still reach out to me and will just when they and just say that was one of the most impactful things that came from that project. So
That's incredible.
yeah,
That is so great. And imagine if we could look at each resident as their star self. You
yeah.
know, there's this term called compersion, which is being happy about another person's happiness. Like, it inspires joy in you. And I think that that is the magnetic force of unlocking an individual's passion. Is all of the sudden it's like a moth to flame. Everyone feels this opportunity to connect. And I can imagine that for you, having gone all over doing the Passions Project, you've made a lot of connections. Are there any collaborations that you've done that were or support from the community that you found particularly exciting?
Well, when the pandemic happened, I was not able to work on the Passions Project directly for at least a year and a half because of restrictions and visitors and close contact. And so since then, it's like I started to have this need to look around and be like, okay, what are there other communities? Because I've always known the story of the Passions Project isn't something that is only could impact how we view older people and aging and to eradicate ageism. It's something that it's a storytelling art activist project that can tell many stories. So something I always wanted to do was to tell stories of LGBTQ plus people. And so I was able to get funding and work within the city that I currently live in, which is my hometown of Racine, Wisconsin. And I was able to highlight 20 individuals from the city of Racine and the surrounding areas to tell their stories and to then also, bring people to greater understanding and greater connection to the LGBTQ plus community in a way, with the hope of being able to break down that barrier of people wanting to other the community, which we saw a lot of certainly throughout the campaign and was a very effective method. And that to me was that was very disheartening, because when we other people, then we're creating those islands and we're pushing people out, and it is a way that we dehumanize people. So always about the Passions Project is trying to humanize. And for me, as an LGBTQ plus identified person, telling the story of the community that I care very deeply about that to me has been one of the most joyful things that I was able to do with the Passions Project. Certainly from the minute I started this project, I was like, I want to create something that highlights LGBTQ plus stories. And I have tried for over 10 years to try to do that. And so it was a unique experience to come home to a city that I felt I had to leave as a young queer kid, thinking like I had to leave home in order to be able to be my truest self, to then come back. And then this is the place where the funding came from, and that I was able to highlight these stories. It was a real full circle moment for me and the project.
I absolutely love that. And the idea that you're using art as a vehicle for social change. I'm so glad you brought up othering. I think often that divisive feeling. I mean, I've been in communities where we've had to have, host seminars on not bullying one another. Often moving into a senior living community feels like going into a middle school cafeteria. And I don't know about you, but I'm pretty sure that like Dante was describing a middle school experience when he was describing the seventh levels. So I feel like there's a great amount of change that can happen, and a welcomingness that can happen when we stop othering and start humanizing. Why do you feel like visual storytelling is the game changer? Because I'm 100% behind it. So tell me your perspective.
Brene Brown talks a lot about like how when you know your neighbor, it's harder to dehumanize. When you know someone personally, it's harder to other them. And I think when you hear someone's voice, when you see their image, when you get to know their story visually on some other level, it's like you can feel like you do know somebody and you are meeting them and becoming a friend to them. So it's like you can, I think storytelling and on a visual level, it brings a depth of voice that gives you that feeling of you're meeting somebody and you're getting to know them. And now it's it's giving you an opportunity to welcome them and bring them into your consciousness and your ability to love, appreciate, and connect. So I think it when you have visual storytelling, it's a great connector. I think it aids in connection, and it really does make you feel as though you are part of something. It can bring you into the story in a way that's unique to just text or reading a story. It's like when you also have a face, it adds voice. And when you see a picture and when you see their passion, it's like you know something very intimate about them. And it just continues to break down and then build bridges. Passions build bridges.
I absolutely think passions build bridges. I love that. There's a Brene Brown quote, I think it was in Braving the Wilderness, where she says, lean close, right? And I think that that's what your art allows people to do, is instead of the zoomed out, that's that person. They've leaned in and they're able to see the things that make them uniquely human. I think that when we, again, going back to that idea of homogenizing, I think that when we assume other people are like us, we make some incorrect assumptions. And I think one of the things I loved about your panel discussion is how many people opened up about their own personal stories as a result of one other person's story. So we start to see connection and similarities that maybe don't directly reflect our life, but reflect the life of someone we love or someone we care about. And I think that what we can do with that, in terms of exponentially creating community, giving people something besides a face to latch onto. Even in our sales training, we talk about the power of a name, using the person's name. And I think that you don't just name their body, you name their spirit, you name the things that are so important to them in your project or throughout the process of your project. So tell me what's next. What's coming next for the Passions Project? Are there any areas you're targeting or things that you would like to do next? I know when we spoke, we had talked a little bit about incarcerated individuals, and I think that there's a great opportunity to break down some stigma around mental health as well,
Yes.
that those individuals don't have as much to offer. So please tell us what's next.
Well, always looking to expand the LGBTQ project, because one of the ways that I see that project is sort of showing, especially older adults, from all parts of the country. Like, I'd love to do a 50-person project and have people from all over the the United States pictured in that, in like all of their regions, and because their stories have their differences, and then they also have their similarities. Immediately, though, I'm working with the local teachers union in Racine, and we are highlighting just school age kids. We started with high school and middle school, and then this year we're going to be doing elementary level kids, where there's a real stigma around public schools, and the kids aren't, like the bad kids that go to public school. And we live in a very diverse community. And so when you're talking about, when people say like public schools are failing, I think when you're talking especially about Racine, it's directly related to racism to say, our failing public schools is like you're saying that, Black and brown kids aren't as smart as other kids. They're not as good as other kids. And that's not fair. So to break down that stigma and to show the cool things that high school students, middle school, throughout their entire public school experience are the things they're doing and the ways that they are tapping into themselves, that project has been incredibly powerful. And it's been something, this is going to be the third year that we're going to be doing it. And we're hoping to do another year next year that would include educators and their passions and kind of bring it together. But there's a lot of issues that are happening in public schools right now. And so to be able to then work with the Passions Project and create this incredible imagery of these incredible students and then ask them what their thoughts are. It's like, with all of the voices that are trying to fix public schools right now, we're not asking the direct user, the students.
So
And
you mentioned that in Scandinavian countries, they actually consult the kids before they update the school playground equipment. I feel like in much the same way with older adults where we have marginalized them and diminished the value of their voices, I think we often have done the same thing with young people. And I've been, as a public school educated individual, I've been really impressed by some of the things that I've seen and experienced from teenagers that I've mentored. Even my children's teachers, the orchestra teacher is so passionate about music and teaching, and you can feel it in her kids that she's teaching. So I think I love what you're doing there. And I think the teachers are going to bring a wonderful amount of inspirational lift for why people are doing what they're doing to support the public school system. So
when I started that project, I was like, well, I work with ageism in older adults. And I was like, well, ageism cuts both ways. And we see a lot of ageism in what's happening in the schools too. So it's been an incredibly rewarding experience and just opened the project up to a lot of new and cool experiences as well. So it's been incredibly fun and rewarding. I've been so grateful to have this opportunity to work in this capacity with the project, for sure.
I love that you're getting both ends of the spectrum, and like this is just going to bring together such a beautiful, beautiful story. Heidi, thank you again for your time today. If there's any listeners who want to get some more information or follow the Passions Project, where can they find you?
The Passions Project, you can find it online. I'm on Instagram mostly. I think there's some stuff on Facebook, but mostly it's on, you can also go to my website, which is the Passions with an S, passionsmovement.com. So I think, it's like when I thought about all these different projects coming together, it's more of a movement of seeing people through their passions than it's just a one individual project in itself. So that's why it's, the Passions movement is kind of a culmination of all of these projects kind of coming together and all of these voices coming together.
I love that. And I'm always here for a movement, right? Our hashtag is welcome disruption because I feel like there's plenty to disrupt. So thank you so much for using your art as a vehicle for social change. Thank you for supporting the older adult community, the LGBTQ plus community. And we're thrilled to continue to support you on your journey.
Thank you so much for having me. It's been so much fun. Thank you.
All right. Thanks, everyone.